It's a bit cold. They can actually, one, energy efficiency is one of my bills, and when enacted into law, it would compel institutions, malls, offices to really put their air conditioner on thermostat, which would be better for our health, including the president and dean of the AIM, Dr. Jik Yong Kang, and myself. At the same time, we will actually conserve I don't have the numbers now, but megawatts upon megawatts of fossil fuel, of power plants that have been built and will be built can actually be scaled down or totally eliminated if only all public institutions and big consumers of electricity would not just transition, but even know energy conservation, which is not just retrofitting, but also putting their aircon to 25 degrees, right? And it's not just AIM. The Philippine Senate is guilty of that because we're so cold in the Senate. That's why I look like I'm coming from Bonn, but actually we're in a tropical country. Is it not so ironic that outside it's so hot and we are in air-conditioned offices when you waste so much usage of electricity when we could be saving, right? So the administration of this building would actually know what I mean. I have much more to say. Just the other day, I'm not even in my speech yet. Just the other day, I spoke before the IFC and the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Shangri-La, and I said the same thing. And I asked the Department of Public Works and Highways, you ask me to speak here every year with the United Architects of the Philippines and the IFC. But whatever we discuss, policies and projects and the road to sustainable development, and climate resilience, do we actually walk or talk? I keep on talking about the 1989 law of the Rainwater Catchment Act, which institutionalizes the creation of rainwater harvesters and collectors in every barangay, and actually every town and city, sitio, and barangay is a DPWH and is a DepEd. Are they actually implementing this? And many more. And so I start out with that statement saying that while we are happy with a jam-packed hall today, and you speak about a subject very close to my heart, especially coming from a vulnerable nation like the Philippines, it is important that we actually walk our talk because the time for talk is over and the time for climate action is not now but yesterday. And so all of the things we discuss now should actually be operationalized in the private businesses and industry, in local governments, in communities, in the academe, not just in brochures and speeches online. The Department of Local Government, I always urge them to make sure that the Local Government Academy and all those who give information down the line should make our communities understand what resilience means, how to operationalize it, and all local governments through their ERA, Internal Revenue Allotment. Oh, I have last 5 minutes, I haven't even started my speech. That means I will no longer read my first 3, sorry about that, I thought I was given 5 extra minutes, and I can just give my speech online then if I just have 5 minutes. So, allow me to go to 5 major factors that contribute to our vulnerability to disasters. Ecosystems decline. Despite our environmental laws, our ecosystems continue to decline. 70% of our mangroves, 20% of the seagrass in our coasts have been destroyed. 90% of our coral reefs are under threat. After 16 years of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Law in 2001, less than 50% of our local governments are actually implementing this. And all it says is we need to institutionalize the segregation of waste at source, recycling, and composting. Second, economic gains are at risk. Economic loss, risk to typhoons and floods is growing as the exposure of economic assets and livelihoods increases. Direct losses from major disasters place a significant fiscal burden on the government and trigger indirect and wider impacts that challenge the country's macroeconomic stability and poverty reduction efforts. Third, poverty prevails. We all know that, despite our impressive economic growth of almost 7%, 6.9%. Actually, poverty incidence remains high because the bottom vulnerable people their needs are not addressed. And it's been said many times, and it's a common fact, that every natural hazard, more than 20 a year, will just push them back. And all the budgets allocated, that could be allocated for health, education, would just go to building and reconstruction if we don't mainstream climate change adaptation, mitigation, disaster risk reduction, or resilience in our governmental budgeting process. Fourth, cities are at risk. The rapid growth of our cities, Metro Manila, one of the most unlivable megacities in the world, combined with climate change and the urban population explosion, create new stresses for urban settlements and make city dwellers increasingly vulnerable. Fifth, climate change magnifies disaster risk. The challenge of adapting to climate extremes gives increased urgency to addressing underlying risk drivers, reducing vulnerability, and strengthening risk governance. If disaster risks can be reduced, then the magnifying effect of climate change will also be reduced and adaptation will be facilitated. So what do we need to do? We need to undertake risk-sensitive planning and investment. This is crucial for local governments, should be at the forefront of planning, preparation, execution of resilience plans. We know we have the NDREAM-C, Climate Change Commission, two of my laws in my second term, and they're mandated to help local governments do not just the local action plan, but to make DRR officers know the importance of the risks, use vulnerability assessments in using their ERA and ALGO and all the LGSF on all funding coming from government. We must invest in DRR by following our geohazard maps to determine the no-build zones opposite the safe areas to build housing and infrastructure. We need to promote community resilience. LGUs could prioritize resilience as part of their political and sustainable development agenda and make disaster risk reduction their legacy opportunity. Initiatives include the establishment of multi-hazard early warning systems, rainwater harvesting, as I mentioned, seed banks, rooftop gardens, roadside ditches and seawalls, mangrove reforestation, and the conduct of drills for preparedness. It is nothing new. This has been done many times, but it is good if all the 1,634 local governments would actually institutionalize this. It is the responsibility of all LGUs to ensure that people understand the risk present in their communities. We also need to strengthen social protection. Let's examine the conditional cash transfer of the DSWD. I've actually mainstreamed the importance of all these adaptation mechanisms in a DSWD budget. We need to conduct an environmental program audit. We have so many laws, as mentioned. Actually, the Clean Air Act, Solid Waste Management Law, the Clean Water Act are the three most important laws. And they're focused on addressing environmental and disaster resilience issues. But implementation really stands improvement. We need to advance economic and business resilience. Government can't do it alone. We need the business sector to mainstream DRR in everything they do. After I speak, I will go to the Top Leaders Forum where the UNISDR and the National Resilience Council will hold this annual event, and we see how the business sector has greatly improved in their commitment to mainstream resilience in their business plans. The government, yes, has been doing some effort in greening our industries in various sectors and government. Climate finance can be improved. There's still a very traditional mindset in terms of our financing institutions. And there's a need to encourage investments to increase awareness on the impact of climate hazards in our midst. A national loss and damage registry and vulnerability assessment could help our banks also assess the need of a proponent in a particular area for a certain project and realize the urgency of lending funds to finance it. The government could also provide technical assistance to assist the private sector in addressing regulatory challenges and technical risks. The government may also share the cost and risk in these climate investments. As a fundamental development strategy, building resilience would help our government sustain the country's socio-economic gains, make a difference in poverty reduction, and eventually ensure the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. As an agenda shared by all concerned with financial, political, disaster, conflict, and climate threats to development, advancing resilience promotes unity of purpose and action among various development stakeholders among all sectors. I will no longer read the rest of my speech, but I'll put it up online. And just to let you know that starting 2018, I've allocated a fund called the AFP Resilience Fund, which is a byproduct of my commandant's paper in the General Staff College, which I will complete within the year, meaning that the AFP, the Armed Forces, as the first line of defense in times of disasters, need to be resilient themselves. And in a study I conducted through committee hearings, technical working groups, and research, we realized that the response mechanism is well ingrained, but pre-disaster activities and preparedness is still wanting in the AFP and the PNP and the frontliners of defense against climate impacts. And so hopefully with the AFP Resilience Fund and capacity building with the Climate Change Commission and the OCD and the NDRIMC Council, we can have a more resilient AFP. Also, we will work together with the Local Government Academy to make sure that all local governments, not just 1/3 of them, would actually implement the local climate action plan, which is mandated under the 2009 climate change law. And when you ask me, the bottom line in adaptation, what is it that we can do apart all these policies, all these PowerPoints and talks? I can just think of a few I can mention offhand, which I already posted in the PowerPoint. Everything about climate is local. It redounds to community action. And what do I mean? Adaptation is local. Do we actually have rainwater harvesters? Have we actually transitioned to renewable energy? Do we have mangrove reforestation and seagrass beds? Do we have seed banks? Do we have early warning system? Have we conducted geohazard in areas where we build our schools and housing projects? Do we have multi-hazard risk assessments? These are just some of very basic information that makes us adaptive, so to speak. And these are very doable projects, activities, which local government and private institutions and even the academe could do. And so on that note, I would like to challenge all of those in this conference here today to have a checklist of adaptation mechanisms which are doable in our respective areas of endeavor and see whether we actually have done this. And that is the role that policymakers play, to be able to influence and urge and mold, not just mold public opinion, but to urge climate action towards the implementation of adaptation mechanisms. So thank you very much for this invitation, and I apologize that I have to rush because I would see his 5-minute stop. Otherwise, I would have lingered, but my whole presentation will be uploaded online. Thank you. Good morning.